They say love is blind, but for these 8 brides, that blindness nearly cost them everything. From hidden criminal pasts to deadly obsessions, and these women learned too late that their dream weddings were about to become live-in nightmares. What happened next will make you question everything you know about trust. Watch to the end if you dare. I never thought I'd see his face again. Not after what he did to Rachel on what should have been the happiest day of her life. I was reviewing potential client applications, just like any other Thursday morning at Perfect Day Planning. That's when I saw it. The bride's father's name, Marcus Blackwood. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, the same name that had haunted my nightmares for 20 years. The hot liquid spread across my pristine white carpet as I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and pulled up the article I'd read 1,000 times. Local bride murdered hours before wedding. Father-in-law charged. The photo matched. Every detail of his face was seared into my memory. He'd served 15 years and now his daughter was getting married. And she wanted me to plan it. My sister's wedding was the reason I became a planner. I wanted to give other brides the perfect day Rachel never got to have. My clients called me obsessive. They had no idea why. I stared at the application for hours. Julia Blackwood, his daughter. She'd been just a kid when it happened, probably didn't even know what her father had done. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something stopped me. I thought about Rachel, about all the questions that never got answered. Why did he do it? What really happened in those missing hours? The police had their theory, but I never believed it was that simple. The way they found her, arranged so carefully in her wedding dress, her makeup still perfect, like she was just sleeping. Only the dark bruises around her neck told a different story. I took a deep breath and clicked accept. The initial consultation was set for Tuesday. I spent the weekend digging through old case files, news clippings, anything I could find. The detective who led the case had retired years ago. He'd warned me to let it go, said some questions were better left unanswered. Everything had to be perfect. The fresh flowers, white roses, Rachel's favorite. Right on time, the door opened. Julia looked nothing like him. She was bright, bubbly, exactly the kind of bride I loved working with. Her ring caught the light as she shook my hand, a princess-cut diamond, just like Rachel's. But then, he walked in behind her, older now, grayer, but those eyes, I'd never forget those eyes. The way they'd watched Rachel at every family dinner, every dress fitting, every rehearsal. He didn't recognize me. I was just Rachel's teenage sister back then. Now I was Sophia Chin, the city's most sought-after wedding planner. My hands didn't shake as I walked them through my portfolio, asked about their vision, took detailed notes. Julia wanted a June wedding, just like Rachel. The same month, the same country club. She talked about growing up hearing stories about beautiful weddings there. As they were leaving, Marcus paused, looked at me strange. "Have we met before?" I smiled my professional smile. "I don't believe so." That night I couldn't sleep, the same way I couldn't sleep for months after Rachel died. I knew I should drop the client, refer them to someone else, protect myself, but this was my chance, maybe my only chance, to find out what really happened that day. To understand why a man would murder his son's bride hours before the ceremony. Why my brother-in-law had disappeared afterward, never to be seen again. I pulled out Rachel's old diary, the one the police never found. The one with the entries about Marcus's strange behavior in the weeks before the wedding. His obsession with every detail, the way he'd look at her sometimes, like she was a prize he'd lost. I had 6 months to plan the perfect wedding, 6 months to get close to them, to find the truth, 6 months to figure out if Nathan, my almost brother-in-law, had been involved too, if that's why he ran, or if he'd discovered something so terrible he had to disappear. The guest list for Julia's wedding includes some of the same names from 20 years ago, people who might finally talk. But as I sit here writing this, I have to wonder, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Because last night, I got a text from an unknown number. "I remember you now, Sophia. We need to talk about Rachel." The timestamp 2:47 a.m., the exact time they found my sister's body 20 years ago. And there's something else. The roses I ordered for the conference room, I specifically requested white. But when they arrived, they were blood red, just like the ones found scattered around Rachel's body. I should be scared. I should run. But instead, I feel a strange sense of calm, Jim, because for the first time in 20 years, I'm close to the truth, and this time, I'm not a helpless teenager. I'm the one in control. I'm the one planning every detail, and Marcus Blackwood has no idea what's coming. I should have known better, being a cybersecurity expert and all, but curiosity got the better of me that day. It started when I was doing a routine security audit for Vale Manor, a beautiful historic wedding venue with a dark secret I wasn't supposed to find. I was checking their network for vulnerabilities when I found it. A mysterious flash drive hidden in the library desktop tower. Being thorough is part of my job description, so I plugged it in. That was my first mistake. The footage made my blood run cold. Security camera clips showing brides in their wedding dresses, walking down empty hallways late at night, then vanishing into thin air. 5 different women, 5 different weddings, 5 unexplained disappearances. I dug deeper into the venue's history, missing persons reports spanning decades, all swept under the rug. The local police had investigated but found nothing. No bodies, no evidence. Just brides who seemed to walk away from their own lives. I couldn't let it go. So I did something incredibly stupid. I got engaged, planned my entire wedding at Vale Manor. Lucas thought I was just being romantic, choosing such a historic venue. If he knew the real reason. That's when things got weird. My laptop camera turning on by itself, strange notifications popping up on my phone, voice recordings activating without my permission. Someone was watching me through my own devices. I'd checked my security logs obsessively, but they showed no signs of intrusion. Yet I could feel eyes on me constantly. Every morning I'd wake up to find my phone had moved from where I'd left it. My browser history showing searches I never made, all about the missing brides. The wedding preparations continued despite my growing unease. Each visit to the venue made my skin crawl more than the last. The ancient stone walls seemed to hold endless secrets, dark wooden floors that had seen too much. I started noticing things during my visits, small details that didn't add up, like how the security cameras would always glitch when pointing at certain corners of the building, or how some rooms felt colder than others, even in the middle of summer. The staff were friendly enough, but their smiles never quite reached their eyes, especially Mrs. Walsh, the elderly event coordinator. She'd been there for over 40 years, had overseen every wedding where a bride disappeared. I tried digging into her background, but found nothing before 1980, like she didn't exist before Vale Manor. One night I stayed late, setting up my own hidden cameras. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps above me. But the upper floor was supposed to be sealed off. I followed the noise, my heart thundering in my chest. The old staircase creaked under my feet. Down the dark hallway, a door stood open, light spilling out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Curious brides shouldn't wander alone. I ran. Somehow made it to my car, shaking so hard I could barely drive. But something made me look back at the building. There in the highest window, a figure in white, a bride's silhouette, watching me leave. I canceled the wedding the next day, told Lucas I just couldn't go through with it. He never forgave me, but at least I'm alive. The flash drive disappeared from my desk that same night. Every trace of evidence gone. Even my hidden cameras had vanished from where I'd placed them. The police didn't believe my story. Said I was just having cold feet, making up excuses, but I know what I saw. I still dream about those other brides, walking down those dark hallways, wondering if they were like me, trying to uncover the truth. Did they notice the strange things too? The moving devices, the mysterious texts, the feeling of being watched. Sometimes I research them. The missing women, Alice Winters, Diana Torres, Emma Wright, Maya Cooper, Lily Mills, all successful professional women, all curious by nature, all gone without a trace. Last week I drove past Vale Manor, saw another bride taking photos on the front steps. I wanted to warn her, tell her to run, but who would believe me? Mrs. Walsh was there too, looking exactly the same as when I first met her. She saw me watching, smiled that empty smile, and sometimes, when I'm alone at night, my devices still turn on by themselves. My phone still shows searches I never made, like someone is still watching, still waiting, for another curious bride to walk through those doors. Still trying to find out what I discovered that night in the sealed wing. I check the missing persons reports every day now, waiting to see another bride added to the list, another woman who asked too many questions, who saw something she wasn't supposed to see, in those ancient halls of Vale Manor. I should have known better. After 15 years of handling divorces, of seeing marriages crumble in the ugliest ways possible, I thought I could spot the warning signs. I was wrong. The irony doesn't escape me. Here I was, Victoria Patel, the most sought-after divorce attorney in Boston, finally ready to walk down the aisle myself at 42, and Gabriel. He seemed perfect. Successful architect, charming, patient with my crushing workload. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation. That's when the nightmares started. Not actual nightmares, the real kind. The kind that creep up in broad daylight when you're reviewing case files. It started with a name, Charlotte Reynolds, one of Gabriel's ex-wives, his first wife. Something about her case felt familiar. I pulled up her file from 7 years ago. She had consulted me once, briefly, just a consultation about leaving her husband. She never came back. I remembered her eyes, wide, haunted, the way her hands shook when she described his controlling behavior. The missing pieces clicked into place. Slowly. 3 wives, all gone. Not dead, just vanished. Each one had tried to leave him. Each one disappeared within days of filing for divorce. The police found nothing suspicious. He had alibis. Perfect alibis. Every time. My hands trembled as I dug deeper. Bank records, property deeds, shell companies. A pattern emerged, methodical, calculated. These women didn't just disappear. They were erased, their assets drained, their families paid off, their identities absorbed into a web of paperwork that led nowhere. I saw his hand in all of it, the architect, building walls of deception. My professional instincts screamed at me to run, but I needed proof. I needed to understand how deep this went. His second wife, Mila Harper, vanished during a business trip to Seattle. Her car was found at the airport. Security footage showed her entering, but never leaving. The third, Ruby Anderson, disappeared from her yoga studio in broad daylight. Her belongings left behind in a neat pile. Her phone, still warm from use. That night, when he came home, I pretended everything was normal, kissed him hello, smiled, laughed at his jokes. But I felt his eyes on me, always watching, always assessing. I made my plans carefully, gathered evidence, created backups, stored files with trusted friends, set up fail-safes. I used everything I'd learned from 15 years of battles in family court. The weight of my discovery pressed down on me, suffocating. Each smile felt like a betrayal, each touch a threat. I documented everything, every conversation, every unusual behavior, every unexplained absence. I hired private investigators to track his movements, installed security cameras in my office, carried a panic button everywhere. When I finally confronted him, in my office, with 2 armed security guards present, he just smiled, that same charming smile. He said, "I always knew you were different, Victoria, smarter than the others." His voice was calm, almost proud, like I had passed some twisted test. The restraining order is in place now. The FBI is investigating. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment at night, I think about those other women, where they are, if they're alive. And I wonder, if I hadn't been who I am, if I hadn't known what to look for, would I have become just another wife who vanished? The wedding ring he gave me sits in an evidence bag now. And every time I pass a construction site, every time I see a new building going up, I think about foundations, about what lies buried underneath, about the secrets we build our lives upon. The case is still ongoing, leads are being followed, but Gabriel, he's disappeared too. Gone without a trace, just like his wives. Only this time he left something behind. A single photograph, delivered to my office in a plain white envelope. 3 women, smiling at a cafe somewhere. The date stamp shows last week. They look different, but I recognize them. Charlotte, Matt, Mila, Ruby, all alive, all together. And on the back, written in his precise architect's handwriting, 4 words that chill me to the bone. The game isn't over. I keep working, keep building my case, keep looking over my shoulder, because I know, somewhere out there, he's watching, planning, waiting, and I can't help but wonder, was I really the one who escaped? Or am I just part of a longer game, one I'm only beginning to understand? I never thought my dream job would turn into a nightmare, but here I am, 3 months away from my own wedding, and I can't look at a white dress without shaking. I've been preserving and restoring antique wedding gowns for 8 years now in my little shop on Maple Street. It's delicate work, the kind that requires absolute precision. Each dress tells a story, holds memories of joy and promise. At least, that's what I used to think. The first package arrived on a Tuesday morning in early October. Just a plain brown box, no return address, no markings except for my name. Thalia Ravenscar. Inside was a wedding dress from the 1960s, yellowed with age, but that wasn't what made my stomach turn. The massive bloodstain across the bodice did that. I almost dropped it right there on my workbench. My assistant Ondine saw my face. "Thalia, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak, because tucked into the folds was a newspaper clipping about a bride who vanished on her wedding day in 1970. Rosemary Thorne. The dress she wore was never found. Until now, I called the police. Detective Calliope Voss took the dress, asked questions, but there wasn't much they could do. The case was decades old. Cold. Then the second package came exactly 1 week later. Another dress, another stain, another missing bride from 1982, Vesper Quinn. The note inside just said, "Soon." My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I started seeing things, shadows moving in my workshop after hours, hearing footsteps when I was alone. The soft swish of taffeta in empty rooms. My fiancé Perseus said I was working too hard, letting my imagination run wild. He didn't understand why I couldn't just ignore the packages, report them, and move on. But he didn't see the third package or the fourth. Each dress was newer than the last, each stain fresher, each victim closer to my age. The latest one came yesterday, addressed to the future Mrs. Perseus Drake. It wasn't vintage, it was brand new. My size exactly. Custom made with hand-sewn pearl beading, just like the one I'd ordered for my own wedding. The note inside was typed on heavy cream cardstock. "I've been waiting for you. Every bride before was just practice." The bloodstain was still wet, spreading slowly across the delicate silk. I'm sitting in my workshop now. The autumn sun is setting early, casting long shadows through the Victorian windows. My own wedding dress hangs in the corner, perfect and white. For now, the police have someone watching at my shop, Officer Sage parked across the street. But they can't be here every minute, and I can't shake this feeling, like someone's standing right behind me. Someone who knows about the secret alterations I made to my dress last week. Someone who's been watching long enough to know my schedule, to know I always stay late on Thursdays, to know I'm alone. The brass bell above my door just chimed, but it's after hours. My shop is closed. And those footsteps coming down the hall, they sound just like the ones from my dreams, heavy boots on hardwood floors. I should run, but I can't move. My phone is in my purse, across the room, too far. The doorknob is turning, and I just know that my dress won't stay white for long. The door is opening, and I hear breathing, right behind me. The scent hits me first, formaldehyde and roses, just like the smell that's been lingering on all those bloodied dresses. I close my eyes, not daring to turn around, not daring to breathe. The floorboard creaks, and suddenly I remember something about Vesper Quinn's case file that Detective Voss showed me. Her mother owned a funeral home, had a brother who helped with the business, a brother who disappeared right after Vesper vanished, who was never found, a brother named Thaddeus Quinn, who would be in his 70s now, with a son who followed in his footsteps, both in profession and obsession. The breathing behind me gets closer, a hand touches my shoulder, and a voice, young but with echoes of age, whispers, "You look just like she did, just like all of them did. And now it's your turn to wear the perfect dress." I feel the needle pierce my neck. As darkness takes me, I realize why the bloodstains on those dresses look so familiar. They weren't just stains, they were patterns, deliberate designs, the kind that only someone who spent their life preserving things could create, the kind I'm about to become. They found me 3 days later, in my own wedding dress, but I was different from the others. I was breathing, barely. The police said it was my knowledge of preservation techniques that saved me, that somehow, through the haze of drugs and pain, I had managed to fight back, to use his own embalming tools against him. They never found him, but they found his workshop, hidden beneath the old Quinn funeral home, with all the dresses, all the brides, all preserved, perfect, forever. I still restore wedding dresses, but now I check every customer's background, every reference, every detail. I never thought I'd spend my retirement attending strangers' weddings, searching for the person who murdered my daughter. The chapel bells still ring in my nightmares, haunting me with memories of Vesper's perfect day turning into every mother's worst nightmare. I may be just a retired high school teacher, but for the past 6 months, I've been living a twisted version of that bridesmaid movie, except instead of finding love, I'm hunting a killer. 30 years of reading teenagers taught me to spot lies, but nothing prepared me for investigating my own daughter's murder. That's what brings me here every Saturday, watching, waiting, learning the rhythms of wedding day death. The wedding was flawless, just like Vesper had planned. Everything matched down to the last detail, the cream roses, the cathedral veil, the string quartet playing canon in D. I remember watching her walk down the aisle on her father's arm, thinking how much she looked like her wedding photo from when she was 5, playing dress-up in my old gown. My beautiful Katie Zylstra arctander. That's the last time I saw her alive. The reception was winding down when Vesper disappeared. Mother's instinct kicked in the moment I noticed she'd been gone too long. I'd spent her whole life protecting her from harm, but I couldn't protect her from this. The search started in the bridal suite. That's where we found her, my baby girl. Still in her wedding dress, the method was precise, professional. No evidence left behind, except for one detail that caught my eye after years of watching true crime shows. A signature. The killer had worked weddings before, and they would do it again. That's when I formed my plan. I started booking consultations with every vendor from Katie's wedding, the florist Maeve Quillerin, the photographer Soren Thackeray, the wedding planner Isolde Pendergast, the chapel coordinator Callista Remington. I told them all the same story. My other daughter was engaged, looking to recreate her sister's perfect day. Most of them remembered Katie, offered condolences, said how tragic it was. I watched their faces, just like I used to watch my students when they lied about homework, looking for tells, little signs that might betray guilt. But I needed more. I needed to see them in their element. So I started attending weddings. Every Saturday, same chapel, same time slot. I pose as a mother of a bride-to-be, sometimes a distant relative, once even as a wedding planner's mentor, all carefully planned through obituary research and social media stalking that my husband says has become an obsession. I observe the staff, the way they move through the crowds, their access to private areas, their routines, the way Quillerin always lingers near the bridal suite, how Thackeray photographs the same spots where security cameras can't reach, Pendergast's obsession with keeping everyone to the schedule, especially during those crucial moments when the bride is alone. Today is wedding number 11. I'm running out of time. My husband thinks I'm losing my mind, says my grief has turned into something dangerous. But I'm getting closer. I've narrowed it down to 3 suspects. Remington, who always disappears during the reception, claiming to check the chapel's ancient heating system. Thackeray, who keeps changing his story about where he was during Vesper's wedding. And Pendergast, who seems too interested in my visits, asking questions that make my skin crawl. I feel Vesper with me sometimes, in the quiet moments before each ceremony starts, when the light streams through the stained glass just right, creating patterns that look like tears on the chapel floor. Her identical twin sister can barely look at herself in the mirror anymore. Seeing Vesper's face in her reflection is too painful, but I won't stop until I find who did this. One more wedding to go, one more chance to catch the person who stole my daughter's happily ever after. And this time, I'll be ready because what they don't know is that wedding number 12. That's my other daughter's wedding, and every person who worked Vesper's wedding will be there, including the killer. I've arranged everything perfectly, just like Vesper's day. The same flowers, the same music, the same timeline. Even convinced my surviving daughter and her fiancé, Cyrus Whitaker, to play along, though they think I've lost my grip on reality. Maybe I have. The bells are ringing again. Time for another ceremony to begin. But this time, I'm not just watching, I'm waiting. And so are the private investigators I hired to pose as wedding guests. Vesper always said I was the strongest person she knew. I just never thought I'd be carrying a pistol in my mother of the bride clutch, or that I'd spend my retirement fund on private security instead of a dream cruise. Today, someone's going to pay for what they did to my baby, and I'm going to make sure justice remembers a mother's love. I should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw his name on that wedding invitation. My true crime podcast had covered dozens of missing brides over the years, but I never thought I'd find myself investigating my best friend's engagement. When Mary's invitation arrived in my mailbox, I was already deep into research for my next episode. Another bride, another small-town wedding, another devastated family left wondering what happened to their daughter. The pattern was always the same: a whirlwind romance, a rushed engagement, and then nothing. Just empty houses and unanswered questions. I remember sitting at my desk that night, staring at the invitation's elegant script. Ambrose. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, because I'd seen it before. In my research, in my notes, in the background of every single case. I hadn't spoken to Katie in months, not since her parents' funeral, not since the fight about her selling their family home. But something made me start digging deeper that night. The kind of digging that makes your coffee go cold and your neck crack from hunching over screens until sunrise. I pulled up every file, every interview transcript, every photo I'd collected over 3 years of investigating disappearances. Ambrose always there, sometimes as a wedding photographer, sometimes as a caterer, sometimes just a guest who signed the registry, different towns, different faces, but always the same name. My hands were shaking when I called Detective Joni Dennelly, who'd helped me with my first missing bride story. "I need everything you have on Ambrose Thackeray," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His response chilled me to the bone. "That's weird. I just got another request about him, from a detective in Katie's town. They're looking into a string of jewelry store robberies, engagement rings, all custom pieces." I booked my flight that night. The whole way there, I kept telling myself I was paranoid. That 3 years of podcasting about missing persons had made me see patterns where none existed. That maybe there was another Ambrose out there. But then I saw the photos on Mary's social media. The engagement ring, identical to the one worn by Octavia Wren before she vanished in 2022. The venue, the same lakeside chapel where Saffron Chen was last seen in 2023. Even their engagement story matched the others. A chance meeting at a coffee shop, a passionate 2-month romance, and now, a rushed wedding planned for next weekend. I didn't tell Mary why I was really coming. How could I? "Hey, bestie, I think your fiancé might be connected to a string of missing brides," isn't exactly the kind of thing you text, but the moment I saw him at their rehearsal dinner, the way he looked at me, like he was trying to place where he'd seen my face before, the way his hand tightened around his wine glass when someone mentioned my podcast, I knew. He'd been listening to my investigations, following my work, watching me get closer and closer to the truth. And now, here I was, walking right into his perfectly planned trap. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Detective again. "Get here now," I whispered, checking under every stall. "And whatever you do, don't let Mary out of your sight. Check the chapel's basement and the old boathouse by the lake." That was 3 days ago. Ambrose disappeared the next morning. They found his laptop, filled with detailed files on every missing bride, including plans for Katie and me, a special folder labeled "The Friends" with our photos, our routines, our weaknesses. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they found in the boathouse, a collection of wedding rings, each one custom made. each one belonging to a bride who never made it down the aisle. Marie won't talk about it, about how close she came to becoming another story in my podcast. She moved in with me last week, says she feels safer here. But sometimes, when I'm recording late at night, I swear I can hear footsteps outside my studio, and I wonder, is he still out there, still watching, still waiting for the perfect bride to complete his collection? I don't know, but I keep recording, keep investigating. The police found evidence linking him to 9 disappearances, but I've tracked his movements back further, to smaller towns, to weddings where brides got cold feet and were never heard from again, to engagement announcements that ended in empty dresses and unanswered questions. So I keep digging, because somewhere out there are still families waiting for answers, still brides trapped in his twisted collection. And I won't stop until they get justice, even if it means looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Even if it means checking every coffee shop I enter, making sure he hasn't found his next perfect match. I never wanted to specialize in last-minute weddings. It just kind of happened. Desperate couples willing to pay triple my normal rate for same-day ceremonies. I couldn't say no to that kind of money. Being a wedding photographer isn't cheap. Equipment costs add up fast. But now, I wish I had never answered that first urgent call. I've been doing this for 15 years. Shooting weddings is my life, capturing those perfect moments of joy. The way newly married couples look at each other, their first dance, the celebration. But something changed 6 months ago. That's when I started noticing him. The same man, different names each time, but the same face, the same cold smile that never quite reached his eyes. I thought I was going crazy at first. I mean, what are the odds? But after the third rush ceremony with this mystery groom, I knew something was wrong. The brides were always different, young, beautiful, glowing with happiness. They all shared that same dreamy look when they gazed at him, like they couldn't believe their luck, finding the perfect man, getting married on a whim, living their own romantic fairy tale. But none of them were ever seen again. It started with Elena. She wore a vintage dress and carried yellow roses. He called himself Den Barrett that day. I remember because it was such an unusual name. 2 weeks later, it was Octavia in an ivory sundress. She married him as Lysander Reed. Then came Persephone with her red hair and emerald eyes. That time he was Bertie Thorne. Each ceremony was the same, rushed and intimate. Just the couple, no family, no friends. Always some story about why it had to be today, why it couldn't wait, why they couldn't have guests. I started digging after the 4th wedding. When Calliope married him as Dominic Frost, I searched for the brides online. Nothing. Their social media accounts just stopped. No updates, no honeymoon photos, no signs of life, just silence. The 5th bride was Evangeline. She had this delicate butterfly tattoo behind her ear. He went by Magnus Woodles that day. I remember my hands trembling as I edited those photos, seeing their faces side by side on my screen. The same man, 5 different names, 5 missing brides. I almost went to the police then, but what would I say? That I had a bad feeling, that something felt wrong, that the same man was getting married over and over. I needed proof, something concrete. The 6th wedding was yesterday. Another frantic call, another desperate plea for a last-minute photographer. I almost said no, but I had to know. I had to see if it was him again. It was. Caspian Durant this time, with another gorgeous bride named Saoirse. My hands shook as I adjusted my camera, watching him through my lens, seeing that familiar, cold smile. That's when I noticed something in the background of my shot. A small tattoo on his wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve. Numbers, like the kind they used to mark victims in the old crime documentaries. My stomach turned. I kept shooting, trying to keep my breathing steady, acting normal, but I saw him watching me, those eyes, studying me like he knew, like he could tell I'd finally figured it out. As I was packing up my gear, Saoirse came to thank me. She seemed so happy, so in love. She mentioned they were heading to some remote cabin for their honeymoon. Just the 2 of them, somewhere peaceful and private. My heart nearly stopped. I wanted to grab her, to tell her to run, but he was there, right behind her. his hand on her shoulder, those cold eyes locked on mine. I finished packing fast, probably too fast, but I had to get out of there, had to get these photos to the police. That's why I'm writing this now. I'm at the station, waiting to talk to a detective. I brought everything, all the photos, all the names, all the dates. My phone keeps buzzing. Another request, another last-minute ceremony, different number, different name. But I know it's him. And this time I think he's coming for me. Because I just got a text from a number I don't recognize. It says, "I need a photographer for my wedding. Today, price is no object." And it's signed Lazarus Vale, the same name that was tattooed on his wrist, hidden beneath all those numbers, the original name, the real name. And now he knows that I know. I never thought I'd have to face him again. That chapter of my life ended 5 years ago when they pulled his car from the river. No body was found, but they said no one could have survived those waters. I believed them. I had to. That belief helped me rebuild my life, start my wedding security company, learn to sleep through the night again. But now, looking at the note in my hands, my heart stopped. The same words, the same threatening message I used to find slipped under my door. "You'll make a beautiful bride. Beautiful forever." The paper trembled between my fingers. That familiar cream-colored stationery, the weight of it, the texture, even the faint scent of his cologne that always lingered on everything he touched. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I run security for high-end weddings now. It's my way of making sure other women feel safe on their special day. After what happened to me, I couldn't just sit back and watch other brides become vulnerable targets. Every wedding is a potential risk. Family drama, jealous exes, drunk guests, I've seen it all. But this is different. When Claire hired me for her upcoming wedding, I thought it would be routine. Rich family, lavish ceremony at the St. Regis, standard protective detail. She was exactly the kind of bride I usually work with. Successful corporate lawyer, perfect engagement photos, the dream wedding she'd been planning since childhood. Then she showed me the threats she'd been receiving. The first one arrived 3 weeks after her engagement announcement in the local paper. My blood ran cold when I saw them. The same poetic threats, the same paper, even the same cursive handwriting that still haunts my dreams. Each word perfectly formed, just like he used to practice for hours. "I can't breathe," I whispered. The room started spinning. The fluorescent lights of my office suddenly too bright. Claire looked at me concerned, her perfect French manicure reaching out to touch my arm. "Are you okay?" I steadied myself against my desk, took a deep breath, forced myself to be professional. "Yes, I've seen threats like these before. I didn't tell her they were mine. I couldn't bring myself to say it. Couldn't admit that the monster from my past might be reaching out to destroy another woman's happiness." The next few weeks were a blur of security preparations, extra cameras installed at every entrance, background checks on all vendors, reviewing guest lists until my eyes burned, all while fighting the growing dread in my stomach. Every shadow made me jump. Every unknown number on my phone made my heart race. I started sleeping with my gun closer to my bed again. Started checking my locks 3 and 4, 5 times before trying to sleep. The nightmares came back too. His hands around my throat, his voice whispering those same words. Beautiful forever. Then yesterday, it happened. I was doing a final venue walkthrough, making sure every emergency exit was properly marked. Every security camera angle perfect. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. That's when I caught a glimpse, just a glimpse of a face I thought I'd never see again. He disappeared around a corner before I could be sure, but I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew. David was alive and he was coming for Claire, just like he'd come for me. The police never believed me when I tried to report his threats back then. They said I was paranoid, traumatized, that I was seeing threats where there were none. Maybe I was, but I'm not anymore. I'm stronger now, more prepared. And this time I have proof. I have the notes, the security footage, everything I need to stop him. My hands don't shake anymore when I check my weapon. My voice doesn't whir when I brief my security team. Claire's wedding is tomorrow, and I'll be ready. I've spent 5 years learning how to protect others. learning every possible way to secure a venue, to spot a threat before it becomes deadly, to react faster, smarter, better than before. Now, I finally have the chance to finish what started that night at the river, to make sure he can never hurt another woman again. I check my concealed weapon, standard for my security work, but tonight it feels different, more personal. I add extra guards at every entrance, review all emergency protocols one last time. And wait, because this time, when David shows up, he won't find a scared victim. He won't find the same woman who once trembled at his touch, who believed his lies about love, who thought she deserved his rage. This time, he'll find me, and I won't let him disappear again. The sun is setting now, casting those same long shadows through the chapel windows, but I'm not afraid of shadows anymore. I know the real monster is coming, and this time, I'm ready for him.